Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Heroes Like You podcast, where we explore the lives of people just like you and I who have had to overcome challenges in their lives and have gone on to accomplish great things. My name is Joe Belliston, and I really appreciate you joining us today. Today's hero is Kathleen Gage. I recently learned of Kathleen and was inspired by her story. She is an author, she's a speaker, she's an award-winning businesswoman, and even now in her 60s, she's just so full of energy and enthusiasm. She has a big heart, she's an animal lover, an animal rescuer. I really enjoyed the time I got to spend with Kathleen and learn more about her. In this conversation, Kathleen gives us a lot of tools that she has learned from her experiences that can help us overcome challenges that we're faced with, help us improve our thinking, and help us live a more vibrant life. I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Kathleen Gage. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show and share your experiences and insights with us. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
So Kathleen, you're an author, you've written several books, you're a keynote speaker, you're a marketing and business strategist, you own your own consulting business, which has been very successful. You're a runner, you're a pet lover. What are you doing these days that keeps you busy and inspires you?
It's funny because just this morning I went on a 4-mile run, and that's one of the things that inspires me. I'm going to be 65 very soon, and, in less than a week, actually. And for my 65th birthday, I'm doing a half marathon. And really what inspires me is being as healthy as I possibly can to go out and continue creating an incredible life. And by incredible life, it's all about simplicity nowadays. To live a life of really gratitude. That's kind of the deal for me nowadays.
Yeah, a lot of people take pride in being busy and filling their schedules to the brim, and they get a lot of fulfillment out of that. But you say simplicity. What do you mean by that? What does that look like?
Keeping things relatively in order, if I will, and not getting caught up in all the bright, shiny objects that life has to offer. And, I went through a period where actually when I first started my business, had no clue what I was doing, like many people, and had a big dream in my heart. And I come from a place where grew up in a middle class family, but by choices that I made around drugs and alcohol, I actually ended up on the streets. And for a period, I was couch surfing, then I was literally out on the streets. And so when I turned my life around, I've been sober 35 years, and when I turned my life around, my definition of success was to see how much material acquisition I could have, get the cars, get the house, get the this, get the that. And I was chasing whatever I could. And I accomplished quite a bit. I was an award-winning business owner when I was in Utah. Actually, the governor of Utah awarded me the home-based business of the year in 2002. I had a billboard up with the governor. And, so I looked at that and I said, okay, I've arrived. But every time I arrived, there was still a feeling of emptiness. And it was like, I never quite could get it. And finally, when I just stepped back and I said, okay, what's going on here? It was really very ego driven at one point, where it was like, look at me, look how successful I am, instead of like, what am I contributing? And my life has really been an unfolding of layers of understanding that really what I'm here for is contribution. And if I have a successful business, that allows me to contribute at a higher level. And yet it's not just about the material acquisition that makes me successful.
Yeah, so it sounds like it moved from kind of a selfish form of success to looking at other people and trying to contribute and finding success that way. Is that right?
Absolutely. And like with what I'm doing in my life today, as a woman in my mid-60s, which, sometimes I'm shocked with that. I have to look at my driver's license and say, did that really happen? Part of my contribution is living a life of vibrancy and health and showing other women as they age that you don't have to end up like your parents did. My mother suffered a terrible death. It was a long, drawn-out death, and she was in the hospital the last couple of years of her life more than she was out of the hospital, had a number of surgeries, and basically just one piece at a time was being taken away. And I looked at that and I thought, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be like that. And God bless her. I mean, that it was just based on choices that she made. And so as I look at what I'm able to contribute today, a lot of it is living my life as an example of what's possible.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. I want to talk about that, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a minute. That all sounds nice. I find success and fulfillment in helping other people. That's a nice thing to say. But you've lived it, I guess. What is the difference between, more selfish, I have everything I want. I have the house, I have the car, I have the respect, the notoriety. These are things that people work their whole lives to get, to accomplish. And you're saying that's not as fulfilling as looking beyond yourself and reaching out to other people and helping them.
Well, actually, Joe, it's a combination of the two because I'm not saying that I don't like money. I don't want to be misunderstood there. I do like to drive a really nice car. I live in a nice home. We have some acreage in Oregon with horses, and we do a lot of animal rescue. And so there's something to be said for that, but it's the motive behind why I achieve those things. And so for me, it's a combination of the two. And what I know to be true, and I've had plenty of evidence that if I get too full of myself and I think I have it all figured out, and oh, look at me, I'm so wonderful, then life has a way of taking that away or bringing me to my knees for me to actually get humble and to get out of ego and to respect the fact that the material things that I enjoy are gifts.
Mm.
And it's what I do with those gifts that make all the difference. So I have nothing against making money. I enjoy the finer things in life, and I also enjoy the simple things in life. But I also know that my business is a vehicle that allows me to do good for other people.
Yeah, that's great. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's interesting that life kind of seems to balance itself out. If you're always so focused on yourself and always just trying to serve me, life will eventually correct itself, and you're going to have to, at some point, look beyond yourself and look beyond your own needs. What do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely. And if you really want to get outside of yourself, rescue a dog. It's like they'll teach you very quickly. As a matter of fact, when I was running this morning, I have a new rescue, and she's been with us about 5 months. She came out of a situation where there were a lot of drugs, methamphetamine, and she was like off the charts when we got her, to the point I was thinking, I don't know if this is going to work out. And yet I made a commitment. And part of what my life is about is that when I make a commitment, I'm going to see it through to the best of my ability. And so as I was taking her running today, I looked at the improvement of where she was 5 months ago to the work that I've put into her over the last 5 months. And a lot of it is just patience, love, and care, teaching her what behaviors are acceptable and what behaviors are not. But she really helps me to get outside of myself because when we do things just for us, oftentimes they're not as fulfilling. Now, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for other people because I know some people that are quite happy just doing things for themselves. But for me, in my life, my experience is that the more that I can see my life as an opportunity to share knowledge, to share insights, to sometimes share a meal with somebody, the more fulfilled I am.
That's good. I want to go back. You mentioned it was probably in your 20s when your life wasn't exactly what it is now. Tell us what got you there. You said you got into drugs and alcohol. You were moving from home to home, couch to couch. What did that look like? How did it start?
It started where, like a lot of teenagers, I broke into my parents' in-home bar and, had a little bit of alcohol, and I really liked the feeling that it gave me. And then I got introduced to drugs in high school, and I immediately took a liking to it. I have to say that it wasn't one of those, oh, let me try it a few times. It was like I liked the feeling of getting outside of myself because I was rather introverted at the time. I didn't feel like I quite fit, and drugs and alcohol gave me that feeling. And they also gave me the courage to do some of the things that I otherwise wouldn't have done, to, speak my mind when I wanted to, things of that nature. Well, for me, I went deeper and deeper into it. Some of us are just, we have it in our DNA that is going to be the direction we go. If we're introduced to drugs and alcohol, we're going to go down a very dark road. And it seemed as if within a very short period of time, it was never enough. and I just started running with a really bad crowd and got more involved in drugs and alcohol to the point that I was a blackout drinker. And I was one of those that, if you think of the worst drunk in a bar, I was that person. I was the one who was asked to leave the real seedy bars. And I couldn't quite figure out why my life had turned out the way it was. I was blaming everything outside of myself, and just kept going further and further down this dark road to the point that I actually moved to a small town in Nevada called Manhattan, Nevada. 100 people lived there. It was a mining town. They had 2 bars in town, and I was asked to leave because I was the town drunk. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And I used to keep that information really private, and I didn't want anybody to know about it. And I realized that the very thing that can be our destruction can also be our salvation. And by the grace of God, I made my way into 12-step programs. I had some incredible people that mentored me early on and really helped me to understand that it wasn't the outside circumstances that caused me to drink. It was my drinking that caused the outside circumstances. And so my choice was I could continue to drink and continue to have a very destructive life, or one day at a time I could make a different choice. And I think for me, that's been the foundation of everything in my life, is that one day at a time we make choices. And it's our choices and the actions behind the choices and the decisions we make that determine the quality of life we have.
I love that. You talk about blaming other people, blaming outside circumstances, but in reality, it's us, right? We can create whatever outcome we want.
Absolutely. And it's not like you can have it all, because there's certain things that we do have limitations on, and we can't have it all without giving something up. And I think about the fact that I'm going to be doing a half marathon for my 65th birthday. I've been training for that for a while now, and it's not like, okay, the success resides in crossing the finish line. That's merely symbolic of all the effort that I've put into the daily decisions I've made to get up early, go out to the river, go take a 4, 5, 6, 7, 10-mile run, and prepare myself for the day that I'll be doing the half marathon. And a lot of times what happens, and I think more now than ever before, Joe, is that people want that push button success.
Yep.
They want to have an idea, they want to push a button, and they want the success to come. And it really was hitting me today when I was on my run that it's not the end result that determines who we are. It's who we become on the way to that end result.
Ooh, I love that. And, I'm thinking there's certainly a lot of people who have been in that same situation where they're addicted to drugs and alcohol and they can't seem to find a way out. Fortunately, you were able to get out of that situation, and I would venture to guess that you wouldn't be where you are today if you hadn't have had that experience. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. And one of the things I do is I actually will go and talk to people who are in that place where they don't think there's any way out. And I'll share my experience, strength, and hope. And just the other day, I went to a women's shelter, and I was kind of a freak of nature to a lot of these women there, because most of them are there at the shelter because of drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny. I was in a meeting room, and there were maybe 4 women out of 65 who came to hear me talk. And of course, I was hearing all the excuses why they couldn't stop or why their life ended up where it was, and yada, yada, yada. And I was able to say, no, it's because you're a drunk, and you're making bad choices. And if you make different choices, now somebody who's been through it, we can talk to another person like that, and we get it. We've walked the path, whatever the path is, whether it be somebody who's overweight, somebody who's had diabetes and they've reversed it, whatever it may be. And so what was interesting, though, is I was watching as I was talking, people would pop their head in to look at this woman who has 35 years of recovery and sobriety. And they're like, that's 35 years of sobriety. And I thought, but for the grace of God, there go I.
Right.
And, that's the thing with anything that we're making changes on. I don't care if it's business. I don't care if it's relationships, drugs and alcohol. We have certain choices we make on a daily basis. And a relationship is a great example. I've been in a 30-year relationship, and there are certain behaviors that are acceptable in a relationship and certain behaviors that are not acceptable. It doesn't mean that the opportunity is not there to do the behaviors behaviors that are not acceptable, but it's the choice we make and it's the energy we put out as to whether or not we attract that into our life. It's the same with business. You have to do certain things in your business every single day in order to have a successful business. And who we surround ourselves with makes a huge difference, because if you surround yourself with people where you're the big fish in a little pond and you look like you have it all together, you're probably not playing at a high enough level. The real key that I have found that has worked for me is to put myself in environments where I'm uncomfortable, where I feel out of sorts, where I feel like I maybe don't belong, but I know that if I stick around and I get mentors and I put the time in and I put the effort in, that I'm going to figure it out.
That is so good, and I'm glad you brought that up. There's a lot we could talk about there, but I want to talk a little bit more about the importance of the people we associate with. A lot of the guests that come on this show talk about that and how important it is to surround yourself with people that build you up and inspire you and don't bring you down. You mentioned that when you were going through that dark time in your life, you were hanging out with the wrong crowd. Well, let's say I want to change my associations and my friends. How do I go about finding those people and having them accept me when I'm not that person that they would want to be with? You know what I mean? How do I go about finding the right people to associate with if I believe they probably don't want to associate with me in the first place?
Well, one is, I think, first of all, to make the decision that we do want to make changes in our life. And again, it doesn't really matter what the change is. I'll use the example of somebody who needs to drop some weight. I've been at periods in my life where I've been incredibly unhealthy, and I'm probably at my healthiest ever right now. And I know that when I wanted to get back in good shape, and it was, I just wanted to be healthy. I had to be willing to make decisions on a daily basis to quit surrounding myself with the people that would go to the fast food restaurants, or all they would do is sit around and eat and drink and, didn't have the healthy behaviors. And I had to admit that I needed help. I think that's a huge one. Is many people have a really hard time asking for help. I'm terrible with that. It's like there's times that my ego gets so in the way of like, oh, I don't want people to know that I need help right now. And I'm actually working on a memoir, and I have a wonderful editor. And I reached out to her recently and I said, I really need some help. I said, my mind is getting the better of me. My ego's getting in the way. There's a part of my story I don't want to share, and I know that I need to share it. So we got on the phone yesterday, actually we did a Zoom call so we could see each other. And I just got very vulnerable with her. And I said, this is what I'm feeling. This is how I'm feeling. And, what was interesting is once I revealed that, she was able to help me. We have to be willing to make ourselves vulnerable. And Brene Brown does a great job. She's got a Netflix talk, and it's all about vulnerability. And when we make ourselves vulnerable, we do take the risk that people are going to reject us. And that's a part of life. I mean, a lot of times we don't want to feel that rejection. We don't want to be told no. Being told no and rejection is a part of life. And the sooner that we can embrace that, the better off we're going to be. But by telling it's making sure that we're telling the right people and asking the right people for help. If I need help in my business, I'm not going to go to somebody who's never run a business before and they know nothing about what it's like to run a business to ask for help, because they're not going to give me the kind of guidance I need. I'm going to go to somebody that really does understand, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm having a problem here. Here's what the challenge is. What would you recommend as a solution? And oftentimes when we ask the very people that we want to surround ourselves with for guidance and help, they're more than willing to help. And I think a lot of it has to do with what our motive is.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. A lot of times, though, we feel like, oh, they don't want to have anything to do with me. If I reach out, they're just going to reject me anyway. But I have found, like you, that as we reach out to these people, they're more than willing to help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think that the longer we've been doing something and we hit a roadblock, the less we want to ask for help, because in our mind, we think we should have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we're all trying to figure this thing called life out.
Right.
I mean, it's like we get good at certain things, but there are times that we just hit roadblocks. And that's when we have to just step back and say, okay, what do I need to do to get to the other side of this? because it's that fear of being rejected, it's that fear of failure that will prevent us from even taking an action in the first place. I remember the very first marathon I participated in. I was 61 years old, and I was being guided by somebody that really should have told me, you have no business doing a full marathon with 3 months worth of training and you've never been a runner. But she said, oh yeah, you can do it. And I'm like, okay, I can do it. Well, literally, it took me 8.5 hours to finish a marathon. And the average for somebody, who's kind of doing it as a sport should be 5 or 6 hours. That's kind of the average. And I literally was crawling across the finish line. And I mean, I was in such pain. I wanted to quit, but I couldn't quit. For myself, I had to keep going. I had to keep pushing. And what I know is that when I was in the middle of it and I hit about mile 19, I was beating myself up like, who did you think you were to do this? Why did you ever think you could do it? You're such a failure, and I went back to all the old thinking. And then my better part of myself just kept saying, one foot in front of the other, just keep going, no matter what, you're going to finish, no matter what, you're going to finish. And the best part of all, I had a group of friends that they were waiting for me at the finish line. And they even had to ask the coordinators to open the gate back up because they had closed at 7 hours. And it was like, if you can't finish in 7 hours, you're not going to finish is kind of the thinking. And 8.5 hours later, I crossed that finish line.
Wow. First of all, congratulations for doing a marathon. I have never run more than 6 miles at a time in my life. I'm more of a sprinter, I guess. I've made a goal this year. We're doing it in July. We're going to do a half marathon, my wife and I. But kudos to you for doing a marathon. And at 61, that's incredible.
Well, thank you. And then I did it the next year and I finished in under 7 hours. So I'm proud of that. And then I started I kind of got my sanity back and it's like, okay, I don't need to do any more full marathons. And then I started doing half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks. And I've got a plaque on the wall that reads Plant Powered Runner. And I've got a whole bunch of medals. They're finisher medals. And some are first in my age group. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So what really excites me about just the fact that I stuck with it is that I stuck with it. Now, the one you're doing with your wife, is that in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, it'll be Salt Lake. Uh-huh.
Really? I might have to come out there and do that marathon.
That would be a tough so one. Fun. This is a half marathon.
One. Okay.
Half marathon. We're not doing the full.
Good for you. You're smart.
We'll see how this goes. Go from there. But as we've been training, I think you alluded to it. There's kind of two parts to the marathon. There's the physical part. It's hard to run. It's hard to keep going, especially at that distance. But then there's that mental part as well, which I believe may even be harder. Now, I've heard you talk in the past about, you said maybe the greatest challenge is controlling your thinking and your thoughts. What do you mean by that? Explain what that looks like for you and how can we better do that? Because, you talk about vulnerability and getting outside yourself and reaching out to other people to ask for help. A lot of times I find myself, and I know a lot of people around me, thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do that. I could never do what they do. I could never be that. And we just bring ourselves down constantly because it's that negative thinking. How do we control that and shift that to our benefit?
Joe, that is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked it because our brain left to our own devices and our thinking left to our own devices is out to kill us, quite seriously. It takes us to those dark places that oftentimes we don't want to admit that we've gone there. And I shot a video just 2 days ago. I left the house really early to go on a run because I woke up in a real stinking thinking mood. And there was no reason for it other than my mind was kicking into some negative thinking. And I thought, okay, what are the tools that I have that help me to get out of the stinking thinking? Well, one is movement, to get out and actually change my physiology and change my breathing. And so I thought, okay, I'm going out to the river and I'm going to do a 4-mile run. And I took my dog with me. And within a mile, I was feeling great. I had gotten rid of all the crappy stuff. And what I was doing is I was listening to, Hal Elrod at the time. And one of the things I do is I look at who I'm surrounding myself with. Am I with naysayers? Am I with people that do a lot of gossip? Am I with people that don't believe that they can get out of where they're at and they're not really into living a productive life. If I'm surrounding myself with those types of people, or I'm watching the news all the time, or I'm watching TV programs that are really negative, that goes into your psyche, that goes into your subconscious. So for me, I'm really conscientious about what I put into my mind, body, and soul. And so the first thing is, when I go running, I don't listen to rock and roll. I don't listen to disco. I don't listen to, whatever music I may really enjoy. I listen to motivational and inspirational speakers, whether it be Tony Robbins, Hal Elrod, Mel Robbins, Lisa Nichols. The list goes on. There's a guy, Aaron Thomas, who's really abrasive in the way he says you can go out and do it. I love listening to him because it really pumps me up and it makes me realize, okay, I am capable of more than I'm giving myself credit for. So that's one of the things I do, is I make sure that I constantly put good stuff into my brain. I have a process that I do every morning, and I learned this from Hal Elrod with his book, The Miracle Morning, where I take an hour every morning and I do what's called the Savers process. And I sit in silence for 10 minutes. I do affirmations for 10 minutes. I do a visualization exercise for 10 minutes. I do exercise for 10 minutes, and this is just stretching exercise because I go to the gym after that, or I go running. I also read for 10 minutes something positive, and then I do what's called scribing or journaling. And inevitably, by the time I get to the other side of that hour, I'm feeling really on fire for the day, if you will. And I also have processes where I block out periods of time to do something really productive. Because what happens is, if we don't feel like we're accomplishing something, as humans, we need to accomplish. And if we don't feel like we're accomplishing, then we get stuck in a rut. So we have to, it's a discipline. A lot of people, they let their feelings take over. And Mel Robbins talks a lot about this in the 5-second rule. We get run by our feelings, and left to our feelings, we're never going to get anything done. Well, I don't feel like getting out of bed. I don't feel like going to the gym. I don't feel like eating healthy. Well, that's great. But if you want the end result of what you're looking for, whatever you say you want, there are certain behaviors and actions you absolutely must take. So it's what you're putting into your mind, body, and soul, who you're surrounding yourself with, what you're listening to, what you're reading, what you're watching. All of that plays into the kind of mindset we're going to have. And I really believe in prayer and meditation. I think prayer and meditation is very powerful.
That's it. Enough said. That's exactly what we were looking for. And
Boom.
we could end the conversation right now and go home completely happy. And I think that goes along with what you were saying earlier about simplicity. If we have our lives just packed to the brim, our schedule every second of the day, busy, we're not going to take time to meditate. We're not going to take time to journal. We're not going to take time to really accomplish these things like you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes we have to schedule that in. I was thinking about this when I was on my run this morning, how in some ways for me, I have to compartmentalize my life. For example, my morning hour of power, I call it. That is my time to get really connected with what I'm doing. I'm working on my memoir, and the conversation I had with my editor yesterday, and the agreement I made with her, with accountability measures put in place, is that I will spend 1 hour a day working on the final rewrite of my manuscript. And this morning I did my hour of power, I did the hour of writing, and then I went on an hour run, and I thought, okay, that's 3 hours out of my day. I know there's probably 5 hours out of my day. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing because I have it scheduled in. And by scheduling it in, it's more likely to happen. For example, if somebody says, okay, I'll do X in my business, whatever that is. I'll make phone calls every day. I'll do an hour of phone calls every day to prospects, and they don't schedule it in. Facebook is going to take their time. LinkedIn is going to take their time. Twitter is going to take their time. Reading blog posts, watching fun videos, and they never got around to that hour of making the phone calls. And then they say, well, how come my business isn't working? And it's because you're not being disciplined. And the reality is discipline has gotten a really bad rap, and there's a lot to be said for discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you take those three things and you do them first, right?
Absolutely.
You didn't say, when I get around to it, I know I'll get my run in maybe later, and things always come up and it never gets done. the
Absolutely.
hour of power is not going to happen unless you do it first thing, right? So putting those
Absolutely.
priorities first, I think, makes a real difference as well.
Well, those things that are most important, we should really put the most attention on.
Yeah. Well, you've given us so much, a lot of tools here. I love that. I do want to bring this up. We talk a lot about the suicide situation on this show. And it's interesting, the suicide rate for the older generation is actually increasing quite a bit. And you've lived it, and it seems like you're living quite a vibrant life. You're loving everything you're doing. What can we do to help these people between their 50s and 70s who seem to be losing hope?
That is such a great question because, yes, I, at points in my life, have been very suicidal. I attempted it when I was drinking a lot, and I even felt like such a failure that I couldn't even do that right. And God bless, my life for the fact that I've had the opportunity to stick around. But I saw something recently where there was a couple, the husband was 74 and the wife was 70, and it was a suicide murder. And I thought probably because they isolated themselves, probably because they're going through financial difficulties, there might be health issues going on, and they thought the only solution, or he thought the only solution, was to do them both in. And I thought how sad that is. And one definition I heard of suicide, or the attempt at suicide, is it is an attempt at a shortcut to serenity.
Hmm.
Because when people are in a place where they're trying to kill themselves, and they really attempt it, they just want out of the pain. And you can't even imagine the amount of emotional pain somebody must be going through for them to attempt that. And so I think a lot of it is about building community. A lot of it is, if you see somebody that they seem to be isolating, they seem to be on their own, reach out to them. And if they give you indications that life isn't worth living, things are so rough, we're in such financial straits, start listening to them and pay attention. Because there's so many there's a lot of misinformation about when somebody says, "Oh, if somebody tells us they're thinking of killing themselves, they're just wanting attention." No, they may be very serious and they need help. So I would say that reach out to people. I remember on one run, I was with a friend that works at the Veterans Administration, and she works with the homeless population. And on the pathway was a woman that was in a sleeping bag, a homeless person sleeping. And I said, let's stop and let's have a conversation with her. And we just sat there and talked to her for a while. And I said, do you need food? Have you eaten for a while? And I said, there are people that care, and there are resources for you. And I thought, I don't know what impact that had on her, but I know that I was called to do it at that moment. And a lot of times we're called to help people, but our thinking gets in the way, and we go, oh, I don't want to bother them. Bother them. If you feel like somebody needs help, bother them, reach out, let them know that you care, and just be there for them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes all they need is to make it through a night. All they need to do is get through that point where they think there's no answer but doing themselves in.
Absolutely. And there's some research out there that says people that are in these suicidal thoughts in this crisis period, if they can get through that crisis period, which has been shown to be about 90 days, only 3 months, if they can push through that 3 months, then the chances of them surviving are way, way higher. And it takes community, it takes people reaching out to help them through that time. But I mean, where would we be today if Kathleen Gage would have succumbed to her suicidal thoughts, right? There are so many people out there who have taken their lives who could have gone on to do great things. There are a lot of people out there who have thought about it, who have gone on to really change the world. And how sad it is if we couldn't help them get through that 3-month period or whatever time it takes to help them become the person that they were put on this earth to be. So I appreciate all of your thoughts on that.
That's such a great point, because I think that goes back to the original conversation we were having about keeping things simple. That when I see homeless people, when I see people that are in dire straits, I really do believe, but for the grace of God, there go I. And when I've built a successful life. I mean, I'm very blessed with what I have in my life today. And sometimes I forget how blessed I am, and it gets back to the simplicity of really keeping it simple, being grateful for the simple things. And I had a sponsor in AA that talked to me about that. She goes, "What do you have to be grateful for?" And I said, "Nothing." She goes, "No, you do have things to be grateful for, and we're going to find them." And I said, "No, you don't get it. I have nothing to be grateful for." She goes, "Well, first of all, you're really arrogant. You do have things to be grateful for." And we started listing real simple things like, "I've got my legs, I've got my arms, I've got my eyes, I've got a roof over my head." And I said, "Yeah, but it's a small place." She goes, "But you've got a roof over your head. You've got a bed that you're sleeping in. You've got a kitchen with food in it." And when you bring things down to the simplest denominator of, we are here right now, and there are actions we can take to shift our thinking into something that's more productive. And I also think that, social media is really, in some ways it's such a blessing, but in some ways it's such a hindrance to people um, they're comparing themselves to the illusion of what somebody else has.
Yeah. Can you go a little deeper on that? I have some strong feelings about that as well. And social media is a wonderful thing, especially for business, marketing, things like that. But it may be causing more damage than we believe. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think that it isolates people in a lot of ways, because if you go into virtually any social situation and you just stand back and watch what people are doing, a great many people are on their phone worrying about what people on social media are saying than they are with the people, they're like ignoring the people that they're right there with at that point in time. So I think that's where it can really harm relationships. But also this whole comparison, like on Instagram, these superstars on Instagram that they're putting these, just amazing images of who they are, the cars they drive, the houses they have, all that kind of stuff. And somebody might be struggling to pay their rent, and they're thinking, "What's wrong with me? How come I can't have that life?"
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for there to be more conversation about the illusion of success that people create.
Absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of times that's what you see isn't exactly how it is, right?
Right.
I recently read a book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last, and he talks a lot about connection and these chemicals in our bodies that help us connect, like oxytocin, serotonin, we have the dopamine, things like that. And social media, a lot of times, is just pure dopamine. You don't get that real human connection that you get face to face, right? And I think a
Absolutely.
lot of that's
Well, it's
missing.
like you hear the ding of a text message coming in, and immediately you're triggered, and you
Right.
want to see, okay, who just texted me? And yes, and there are studies that have been done around how the brain has been recircuited as a result of the internet, of social media, of the response time, of our attention span, and it's getting shorter and shorter all the time.
Yeah.
But a lot of it also, what I've discovered, Joe, is the way that I eat has a huge impact on my emotional well-being. If I eat a lot of processed sugar, and I don't eat any processed sugar anymore, I went plant-based about 8 months ago. That was probably, other than stopping drinking and drugs, that was probably the greatest life choice that I've ever made, is to really look at consuming whole food, plant-based diet. I just feel better. I have more energy. I have more clarity. I don't have the emotional ups and downs and the mood swings that sugar would give me, because I was a sugar junkie for sure. It's like go get 10 candy bars and finish them all in one sitting. And unfortunately, a lot of people are doing that, and that really wreaks havoc on your mind.
Well, Kathleen, I'm really glad you brought that up. My wife and I have tried really hard this past year to reduce the amount of processed sugar that we're eating, and we've found that it makes not only a big difference in our energy levels and the way we feel, but in our overall appearance as well.
Right.
And I'm sure you've done a lot more research on this than I have. Could you explain a little bit more about the benefits of reducing the amount of sugar we eat?
Yeah, I would say, for anybody who's interested in really learning about what a plant-based diet can do for them, there's a book by Dr. Joel Furman, and it's Fuhrman, and it's called Eat to Live. And it really has some science behind the benefits of getting rid of processed sugar, oils, dairy, and animal products, because all of those are chemical laden, like animal products. There are so many chemicals and toxins in that, how they factory farm animals, that actually goes into our body. So energetically, we're picking that up.
Well, that's good. There's got to be, I'm going to play devil's advocate again. There's got to be some room for protein, right? Protein's good for your body.
Protein is great for your body. And actually, yeah. Oh, no. A plant-based diet, you get tons of protein with beans, legumes, greens. I get more protein now than I did when I was eating animal-based.
Interesting.
Yeah. And digging a little deeper, the information we've been led to believe around needing animal protein is through major marketing and promotions campaigns by the meat industry and by the poultry industry and by the fish industry and by the dairy industry. I mean, if you look at like when a scientific report is released and it's leaning towards okay, you should have X amount of beef in your diet, look at who funded that research. And oftentimes it will be the very organization that's going to benefit by you doing what they're saying to do.
Oh, interesting. And you're a marketing guru, so you know all about that stuff.
I dig deep. I like to do my research.
Well, that's good. Well, Kathleen, this has been just a delight to talk with you. You've given us so many tools, how to improve our thinking, what to do when we're down. You've given us so much today. I really, really appreciate you being on the show. I'm better for it. I know our audience is better for it. So thanks so much for taking the time.
My absolute pleasure, Joe. Thank you.
Boy, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Kathleen was really, really fun to talk to and offered up some really good advice and some great tools that we can use if we're ever feeling down or if we feel like we need to make some changes. I mean, someone who came from rock bottom, living on the streets to where she is today, that's pretty amazing. She has a great business, she's living a life of purpose, and it all comes from making a decision that she wanted to change, and she did the things necessary to do that. Now, I wanted to touch real briefly on a couple of things that she said. First of all, the power of our thoughts and how our thinking left to our own devices will not lead us where we want to go. If we're not intentional about what we're thinking and what we're putting into our minds, it's going to lead us somewhere where we don't want to be. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I made the decision to significantly reduce the amount of news that I was reading and that I was listening to. And I haven't regretted that in the least. I replaced it with good content. I replaced it with listening to books, listening to podcasts, reading more, and I can see significant improvements in my life from that decision alone. So I couldn't agree more that the things that we're thinking and the things that we're putting into our minds have to be things that lead us to where we want to go. The other thing is, don't blame people or don't blame outside circumstances on the situation that you're in. I mean, there may be people who did you wrong, or there may be things outside of your control that put you in a bad situation. But don't measure yourself on where you're at now. Measure yourself on who you're becoming and where you're going, and then make the choices necessary to get to where you want to be. I love a quote by Robert Anthony that says, "When you blame others, you give up your power to change." But it's so easy to do. It's so easy to blame other people or blame situations. But where does that get us? It's not going to get us to where we want to be. The last thing is, what are some things we can do if we're feeling down or if we're feeling bad about ourselves? Well, get up and move. Don't stay idle. Don't sit and be isolated from other people. Get up and move around. Maybe we need to change our associations, our friends. Maybe we need to change our diet. These things can all help us when we're feeling low. Don't just continue doing what you're doing. If you continue doing what you're doing, you're always going to get what you've always got. Well, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope you've been inspired. I hope this has given you something to think about and maybe some ways that you can improve your life and help others who may be feeling down, maybe feeling low, maybe in a really dark time of their life. Go out and help lift somebody else, which will in turn help you. Well, a big thanks to Kathleen for taking time to come on the show today. A big thanks to you, the listener. My name is Joe Belliston. It's a great day to be alive. We'll see you next time, and God bless.